useful, you know. And Tsongkhapa, this is how they handle it in the Pasangikas. And Tsongkhapa says, there's nothing from the side of the cup that makes it a cup, but nevertheless, it does function as a cup. So that's why they say it's like an illusion. I like, you know, we use the term in our culture, I think it's like smoke and mirrors. I think it's a great term. It's like an illusion. It appears to be there, but as soon as you start to try to find it, you can't. So there's not an atom, Lama Zopa says. There's not one atom of anything. Not one atom. There can't be. Because if it were something from the side of the cup, it would have to be independent of causes and conditions, independent of the parts, but crucially, the subtlest one, it would have to exist independently of the mind that calls it that. That's the subtlest one. In other words, you could say it this way, there's not an atom of meaning in anything that isn't given to it by the mind. That's the meaning of unilateral. That's the subtlest meaning. That's the hardest one to get. There's not an atom of anything. But there's not any meaning in anything. There's no meaning in anything that doesn't come from the mind. So as soon as we hear there's no meaning in anything, we think, oh, well, chuck the baby out of the bathwater, we'll all kind of die in nihilism. No, there's not an atom, or the way they say it is, as I said, there's nothing from the side of the object that makes it a cup, that makes you a self, that makes it enlightenment, that makes it hell, that makes it heaven, that makes it good, makes it bad, or anything else that isn't given by the mind. Buddha's saying the mind makes up everything, but not just make up in a random way. It has to function according to its definition. It's very rigorous. So you can never, these two truths are so tight, you can never get lost. Right now, the way Buddha says, we have naturally, because of this maripa, we have the two extreme views. As soon as we say, you know, the word, there is nothing on the side of the cup, which means the cup is empty, it is in its own side, that's the words, we instinctively hear, oh, well, there's no cup. Chuck the baby out. We as Buddhists say this quite often. Well, it's all empty anyway. It doesn't matter, we will say. That's wrong view. That's nihilism, and that's dreadful. That's the worst. So then we've got the other one. As soon as we hear that there is a cup that does exist, independent upon causes, independent upon parts, independent upon mind, calling it that, we kind of go, oh, phew, what a relief. There's something after all. Grasp. And that's the other extreme. That's the reification, the concretizing process. And we've got these two wrong views instinctively. And these are the views of the universe. The creator religions are this one. The materialist view is this one. There's nothing. And we go between these emotionally. Look at our lives emotionally. Attachment is the one that over-exaggerates everything and sets it in stone, you know. I always quote Nicole Kidman when I read an interview with her. I mean, I love the woman. I'm always using her as an example. It's not fair. I read an interview with her in Vanity Fair, which is still with Tom Cruise, you know. And she said, she finished the article, we will be together until we are 80, she said. Do you understand? That's what we all do. That's what attachment does, because it can't bear the thought of not having that, so then we add permanence to the mix. I've got it forever. And it feels this way. That's how this is the grossest mistake. This is the mistake of eternalism. This is the reification process. This is the one extreme view. And then we hear the nothingness one, we chuck the baby out of the bathwater. So the Tsongkhapa's marvelous approach is every time we hear there is nothing from the side of the eye that isn't merely labelled by the mind. We consciously bring it to the middle way. The middle way is in between these two. We consciously take ourselves away from the nihilistic view and we say, that means it's a dependent arising. Every time we hear that something does exist as a dependent arising, in order to stop grasping at it and reifying it, we bring it towards the middle way and we say, that means there is nothing from its own side. So initially these two contradict. Instinctively they contradict. We have to consciously practice. This is why the two truths, this way Tsongkhapa handled it is so marvellous. Why, as Lama Yeshe paraphrases Tsongkhapa, dependent arising is a king of logics to prove emptiness, you know. It's such a great method. You won't get lost if you use this method. You practice remembering when you say emptiness, it means dependent arising. And you practice when you fear-dependent arising, which makes you feel safe, because it feels like there is something, that means emptiness. This is you. Then finally, middle way is when you finally become a Buddha, and these two are simultaneous. Very tasty way, best way, really the tastiest way to get our heads around how things exist. Maybe you should ask some questions. I'm sorry, I'm talking a bit too much.
Go for it,
Whatever.
I would like to know how a seed is trigger that creates the next life.
What, darling? Sorry.
You said different kind of seed can be triggered.
Yeah, at the time before you stop breathing, yes.
So what makes that choice?
You're being peaceful and virtuous. Because in Buddhist view, there's an absolutely natural, organic relationship between a mind, when the mind is peaceful, that has a natural relationship with virtue. So if your mind is peaceful at the time of death and not freaking out and frantic, that will encourage a virtuous seed to be triggered. Because we're carrying trillions of karmic seeds. And so if you're dying freaked out, which is ego, which is total panic, total grasping, that can only trigger a negative seed because they have this really natural relationship. That's what causes it. That's why it's vital to die with peace and virtue. You see? Because that will trigger a virtuous seed. It's a natural organic relationship. This is the logic behind it. And we look into our own lives. Check the time when you're angry, depressed. It's completely I-based. It's totally frantic I-based. It's the nature of ego. And it only causes craziness. When the mind is peaceful, it's virtuous. It's more spacious and interdependent, isn't it? Do you understand? Yes.
Yes. So I've noticed that, I don't know, I feel like a good friend of mine said that the emotions, we create our emotions. They're an internal response. And I started noticing that, and I was able to be more at peace. And I've actually been preferring this kind of at peace and not really emotional. But also, I feel like happiness can be pretty awesome.
I understand, that's right. That's right. It is awesome, that's right.
So should I aim in life to be happy?
I understand.
Or is this
I understand.
place?
The crucial piece here is to define precisely what we mean by happiness and what Buddha is referring to as happiness. Okay? So this is where it's very, very difficult. What we mean by happiness, what you mean, is when attachment gets what it wants. When we get a sense object, when there's pleasure, when there's some joy, some person's kind to us, we're having a fun time, we enjoy something. Would you agree that's what we mean by happiness, isn't it? In general, would you agree with that?
Maybe a mix of both definitions. Like, I do feel content. Like, I feel...
But when you say you like happiness, you meant the happiness that's coming from attachment, didn't you? That's what you meant by it.
I think both, yeah.
No. You did say, you're trying to be content, but you do like that. But happiness is awesome, you said.
Yeah, I mean...
So you're meaning the one that comes from attachment getting what it wants. Okay, okay. Let me say this and see what you think.
Okay.
When we begin to distinguish in our minds from being our own therapists, the difference between attachment, for example, a delusion, the primordial delusion that Buddha says runs the universe, runs our show every millisecond. It's there at the subtlest level, starting from the time of conception. First of all, at the level of deepest dissatisfaction. Then that means there's this constant sense that there's not enough. I haven't got enough. I am not enough. And then naturally it gives rise to hankering to get something. And then all this is a function of attachment. It's multifaceted. And then this attachment causes, then we start to think about the things that we feel we're missing, because that's what dissatisfaction is. And then due to whatever karmic connection we have, whether it's food or bodies or music or money or you name it, or killing people, whatever we're attached to, then that attachment then will hanker after something. And then the attachment, a state of mind, will cause that something to look really delicious, and we'll go rushing after it. And then the trick is, and this is why it's so difficult, that attachment triggers a very nice feeling in the body. And that's what we call happiness. That's what we call happiness, honey. That's what we call happiness. That's what we call happiness. And we don't, please listen. You asked me a question, let me say it. You're going to say the next sentence. Listen. So what we, in general, mean by happiness is when attachment, it's what we get when attachment gets what it wants. Now, Buddha's saying, of course it's long term, no, baby, you're wrong. Happiness is what you are left with when you have given up attachment. And that happiness, and don't think it's religious, it's utter bliss, clarity, joy, fulfillment, 1,000,000 times more blissful than any happiness from the best sense object in the universe. And it's extremely subtle, this process. Extremely subtle. It's very hard to distinguish that from simply waking up one day and feeling joyful because someone's happy. You know, it's very hard. So we have to understand it and learn to distinguish. And then the next step is we have to distinguish between, for example, the attachment for the chocolate cake and then the pleasure, which is not attachment. Pleasure is a valid state of mind that is triggered when you get the chocolate cake. And this is the tricky part. Pleasure is called happiness. There's nothing wrong with it. But the Buddha says right now, the pleasure that we experience, which is a valid state of mind, the only way we can trigger a pleasant feeling is when we get a sense object. He says it's hugely contaminated pleasure. The pleasure he's talking about, which sounds boring to us, is the natural state of the mind that's unencumbered by delusions. That's what we're aiming for. And that bliss, that pleasure is stable and doesn't go up and down like a yo-yo and doesn't depend upon getting things. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
So
Thank you, because I was having trouble distinguishing it, and you really helped out.
Precisely. You've got to know the difference between the words. So right now, the word pleasure, we confuse pleasure with attachment. So when we have a lot of, even the word pleasure sounds a bit like sinful. Oh, I should, happy sounds sort of okay. But pleasure and happiness are synonymous. Okay? And the Buddha would say, he's actually saying, he's telling us, hey, you guys, I've got methods to get such bliss you wouldn't believe. But your method is you've got to give up attachment. So it's difficult. Really difficult. Do you understand? And he's really meaning it sincerely. He says it's the natural state of your mind. But the mind that's unencumbered by delusions. Because we're like vampires. We're like greedy heroin addicts right now. That's the level of attachment we've got for everything. And it's really almost impossible for us to trigger a pleasant feeling that isn't coming via a sense object. It's quite profoundly subtle the way Buddha describes it. So we have to have a lot of humility and patience and intelligence in understanding the way it all works. It's quite refined and subtle. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Are you satisfied with that answer?
Yeah, I guess so.
You don't have to be. You can ask a question from it if you're not clear.
It's going to take some
Okay,
thinking.
good. Think about it. Okay,
Yeah.
good, John. Someone else, yes, please.
When you were talking about the table has a cup on it and
Yeah,
iPad,
right.
and then it seemed like there was a difference between the eye having the nose and the hand. And the
That's
foot.
right.
And like one was more subtle than the other.
No, identical. They're both exactly the same
Okay.
statement. Same statement. If, in other words, if it is a true statement conventionally, it's a simple point. If it's a true statement conventionally, that a table has a cup and an iPad, you have to point out three phenomena that are separate from each other. So if there's an eye that owns a hand and a nose, you've got to point out three phenomena. An eye that's separate from a hand and a nose that's separate from the eye. Otherwise, that's the shock to it. It's the same.
Yeah.
So it's not more subtle. It's very simple.
Okay, that was confusing.
No, that's right, precisely.
When I heard table has cup
Yeah.
and iPad, it's like has is a possessive, and who is the table? Where is the table that has the cup?
No, now you're getting too far. That's another discussion. To look into the status of the table, we're talking conventional truth here. We all accept that's the label for this is table, and cup, and iPad. We're not looking into the emptiness of these things yet, we're looking conventionally. If conventional statement, you've got $3 in your pocket, you have to point out three separate dollars. So you're pointing out three phenomena, eye, a nose, and a hand. It's really simple, but it's shocking to us. You have to point out three separate phenomena, each of which is not the other. Very simple. But we know we can't. Or we think it might be there if we look hard enough. In which case you have to look, that's what Buddha says, until you're certain that you will find the emptiness of that eye. Because you see, we know instinctively, when we talk our ordinary language, we know the eye does depend upon hands and noses and feet, doesn't it? But the I that we think is there wouldn't be dependent, wouldn't be interdependent, would be independent. That's the point of the part. What do you think?
Nothing really.
Nothing. That's absurd. Don't say nothing. It's very depressing.
There was just a
Nothing.
confusion between those two were presented separately, and when the table thing was presented, it seemed exactly the same as.
But it is.
And so it was just interesting experientially, like.
Don't get cosmic, please. Keep simple. Keep your words simple. What did you get from that?
I was just curious. Earlier, you said you said epistemological.
Model of the mind. Which
Yeah,
I'm
and it's
discussing.
psychological.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if those two different presentations.
Yeah, of course they
relate
are.
to those
That's
two
got nothing to do with
different-
this. No. That's a different discussion. The epistemological model of the mind in Buddhism is describing the way mind functions. Mental consciousness, sensory consciousness, conception, perception, all variations of the way technically the mind functions. The psychological model is the actual contents of the mind, the states of mind.
And so would that correspond to like cup,
Nothing to do
play?
with this. Nothing to do with this. Nothing to do with this. You're extrapolating where there's no extrapolating to be done. You're running off into some la la land. I'm not being rude to you, but you're going somewhere where it doesn't belong. It's a simple statement to think about, to get some sense of how there can't be that I that's independent of the parts. It's a precise point. Don't go off, you know. That's the point. That point. No more, no less. Yes.
It's a correct conclusion of an emptiness meditation.
I can't quite hear you, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it the correct conclusion of an emptiness meditation that karma matters?
Absolutely, it would be, definitely, because cause and effect, the first level of dependent arising is that things exist in dependence upon causes and conditions. So karma is the most amazing example of that, which is the best way to think about how I, poor little self-pity, innocent victim I, is in fact the result of causes and conditions. So that is helping you understand emptiness. First level.
Right.
Absolutely. Definitely.
And then, so we're supposed to be taking it to the marketplace, so to speak, right? What we're talking about
What do you mean?
tonight was
I
how.
don't know. What do you mean marketplace? What?
Oh, well, I mean, here we are in New York City,
Mhm.
and we're trying to apply the teachings from centuries ago
That's right.
to current.
But who cares if they're centuries? If they're true, they're true.
Right, I know, I'm saying.
So
But
then-
it seems that things are happening quicker. So are there particular sensitivities to the aspects of our actions? Are there particular guidances in respect to karma? It seems as though karma matters. At the end result, karma seems to be the driving factor. And we're in a fast-moving
So I'm
world.
really losing you a bit. I'm really,
Okay.
I want to understand you.
I,
What's your
I'm trying
question?
to, my question is that karma matters,
We agreed it does.
and we agree it does.
This marketplace business threw me.
Right, okay.
What are you saying? I want to hear it. What do you mean?
Yeah. I'm saying, what are we to be thinking about when we are concerned with karma?
Watch your body, speech, and mind like a hawk, so you don't sow a seed in your mind that will ripen as your suffering because you're sick to death of suffering, baby. That's how you protect karma. When we understand that karma means every millisecond of what you think and do and say sows a seed in your mind that will ripen in the future as your happiness or suffering. Given that you want happiness and not suffering, that means you better be careful not to sow negative seeds. That means you have to know what a negative action is. A negative action is one that harms another that's based on a delusion. A delusion is called attachment or aversion. 99% of our actions are based on attachment or aversion. That means you've got to first control your body and speech and back off and don't kill and don't lie and don't steal and don't jump on the wrong partner and control your mouth and don't talk bad things about people behind their backs, including politicians, and don't talk about your ex-wife and this person and crack jokes about people. Watch your body and speech like a hawk. So you don't sow seeds in your mind that will produce your future suffering. And how do you know you don't like suffering? Check your present life. Do you like being bad mouthed? Do you like being cheated on? Do you like being harmed? Do you like being lied to? Do you like being sick? The answer is no, isn't it? Well, guess what? The cause is your past rubbish, so stop doing the rubbish. That's how you apply karma every day. And then when you get to harness your crazy energy, now you have the luxury of noticing the delusions that inform your actions. And you start to meditate and work on those. And then get ahead of the game.
Super stuff.
Precisely. One step at a time. And the fact all we're in living in this insane asylum is just because it's attachment gone mad. That's all this society of ours is just rampant attachment.
Or aversion.
Well, aversion is what the result when attachment doesn't get what it wants. That's right. Precisely. You live between those two. And depression is just internalized aversion. Yeah. And then yes and yes. 1, 2, 3, go. And then 4. And then 5. And then 6. Yeah, go on. Yes.
And following up with the karma.
Yes.
The seeds are planted in the mind, so would it be fair to say that the effects of karma ripen in the mind?
And mind, and because you've got a body and mind, and because you connect with sentient beings, it ripens in your mind and in your life, in actions. Experiences similar to the cause and environmental are both out there that happen, stuff that happens to us.
So that's what I wanted to,
Yes.
to ask you about.
Yes.
So, if, say, a hurricane comes
Yep.
and destroys the neighborhood that you live in,
Yep.
Is that a result of your mind
I
that this
understand.
manifests this way?
I understand.
Or is your experience of that event
I
the ripening of
I understand
karma?
exactly. This is where it really is helpful to hear this view, this model, that's from the Vajrayana especially, that describes how the universe is made up of minds and matter is the 4 elements. And second, all minds are inextricably linked to their own set of the 4 elements. This is, I think, really helps us. I'll explain. Lama Zopa said one time, just briefly, that in the color chakra tantra, you know, the tantra is used in terms of a type of practice, but a type of also a text. So in the color chakra teachings, he says there are these detailed explanations of the intimate relationship between internal and external energy, which means the mind and matter. So, lives ago, due to delusions in our mind, delusion, a negative state of mind, anger, attachment, it pollutes our wind energies. The subtle physical energy is the 72,000 subtle channels, and all the prana, the wind energies that course through those channels. And they say in this Vajrayana that the mind rides on the wind. They've got these detailed descriptions of this whole process. Mind is inextricably linked with these wind energies. So when the mind is deluded, it pollutes the wind energies. That's what eventually causes one's sickness, born into a life where you have sick body. It's due to past negative actions, starting with a delusion. And then in turn, over countless lives, that negative karma manifests as external imbalance of the elements called an earthquake. The elements are completely inert. Okay, they have no power from their own side. They're totally not driven by a superior being, and they're not merely being laws of their own, which is a materialist view. But they're inert, and they're all the way the elements manifest. Whether it's peaceful, every day you wake up, the sun is lovely, the wind is nice, cool on a warm day, warm on a cool day, elements are delicious, the food is lovely, the water is pure. That's no accident. That's the long-term karmic result of collective virtue or non-virtue of those groups or individuals who experience the elements in that way. It's all caused by karma. Karma is done by the mind, but because the mind and the body are intimately connected, that's what causes the physical elements to be sick here and imbalanced out there, or healthy here and unbalanced out there. It's an explanation of the universe. Hang on a minute. It's an explanation of the physical. Buddha's teachings are an explanation. It's a world view of how things happen. Universes, planets, realms, hell realms, spirits, God realms. It's all intimately connected. It's all explained in the teachings based upon this model. Just please wait. He's talking.
I'm confused about one thing. Again,
Yeah.
you spoke of, I've been practicing for many years.
Yes.
And this is, what I'm confused about is you could have a situation.
Okay, stop. You stop for a second. You've got to acknowledge what I said. Do you hear what I'm saying? I mean, I'm explaining Buddha's teachings. I'm not just making up a trip here. Can you first hear this? But can you hear how this can be an explanation, even vaguely, roughly, an explanation of what you're asking?
Yes,
or not?
Of how mind can affect matter.
No,
And
yes,
it's
of course.
related
Mind
to
can
it.
only be affected by matter. Matter can only be affected by mind. Matter is inert. Minds, the universe is pervaded by sentient beings. Wherever there is matter, there are minds. And all minds are linked to their own 4 elements. Whatever the mind does impacts upon those elements. And then, as Amazon said, in turn impacts upon the external environment. This is environmental karma. That's what it means. That includes hell beings. What's a hell being? A mind that's due to heavy negativity, that's now you could say his mind is conjoined with the fire element and has the karmic appearances of total nightmares. Everything is made by mind. Everything is created by mind. This is what it's teaching.
Well, yes, I agree with you 100%. And also everything is empty. That's why it's able to
We're not
create.
discussing emptiness. You don't throw it. Of course it's empty. It goes without saying. We're discussing convention here. We're discussing conventional reality. Don't throw the absolute into the mix here. It's not a discussion. Of course it's empty. That's the point.
Yes.
But of course it's a given because it's a dependent arising.
But what's confusing to me
Yeah.
is you could have this, what we could call a catastrophe of a tornado or a hurricane.
Yeah, sure.
And it would be experienced by most people in that situation
Yes.
as a negative,
Of course. So then.
but not necessarily everyone.
That proves it's empty, honey. That proves it's the due to karma. You know, it proves it. There's the point. It proves it's not set in stone, but it doesn't. It proves karma. Of course, it doesn't mean that everybody. I mean, you know, everybody. Some of my friends in prison, they're happy.
Yeah.
They changed their mind, but that proves emptiness, and it proves dependent arising.
I agree.
That's the point. So you have
Then
no
we
question.
ask more about
So you have no question, then you're done. So hang on a minute. You people had a question, but somebody else wanted to say something. What do you want to say? Yes. Who was it? Had an argument. What do you want to say?
Well, I had my hand up prior. I was in the queue, and then somebody else.
Oh, darling, I'm so sorry. You can come first. Come on. Happy to hear. What do you want to say?
I have. First, I want to say thank you for for being here.
Good. I have pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like kind of a bit of a greedy heroin addict. I have like a million things I want to ask you.
So, darling, what's your question, sweetheart?
The first part, the first thing I was curious about, you sort of like skipped over not skipped over, but I mean the very first part would be the vows. You know, making sure you're
Yes.
not jumping on the wrong
Yes,
people.
yes, that's right.
I was wondering if you could just share a little bit more about
Okay,
that.
so yeah, I will. But when I was talking to him, somebody kept butting in. Who was that? Okay, what do you want to say? I'll answer you. I will. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that
Yeah.
I mean, there are definitely some regions in the world which there you have much higher chance of cataclysm, like I don't know, Japan. And it doesn't mean that the people who live over there are evil.
Who said they
Because
are?
other
Hey,
world-
hey! Shh. Excuse me. Who says they are? That's
No,
not-
I'm just saying.
Why do
it's
you
not
say
a matter
it
of their
doesn't mean?
karma.
But I beg your pardon?
It's not a matter of their karma. That's
Don't be
a matter-
ridiculous. We're talking Buddhism here, not your view. This is called Buddhism. You're talking something else, and you're allowed to have another view, darling. But we're talking Buddhism, and Buddhism says it is. You can argue with it, but we're talking Buddhism in this room. You don't have to agree, sweetheart. Of course it's karma. That's my point. But you don't have to agree with me.
That's
You see?
fine. I'm just,
So you're disagreeing. That's very fine.
I disagree, and I just wanted to put the point that some regions. in
But
the
I know
world-
that already. We know that Buddha knows that too.
Okay, that's fine.
But he says, for your mind to hear this, he says karma is a natural law that runs the entire universe. There's not a millisecond of any experience of any sentient being that isn't the fruit of that sentient being's past actions. That's a statement of truth according to the Buddha. So if you want to look into the view you have got and compare it with Buddha's, you need to know what Buddha says first. That's what Buddha says.
I agree.
You agree with what?
No, I agree that I should look.
That's right. And then you can have an intelligent argument with the Buddha.
Yeah.
Okay, good. What do you other people want to say? Go on, I've got your question. What's yours?
My question was,
Yeah, go.
you were talking about how you mentioned beginningless time.
Yeah.
And so cause and effect.
And beginningless matter.
Beginningless matter as well.
Beginningless is in general, whatever exists.
In general, right? So if ignorance is present throughout this.
Yeah, go. What's the question? Link to the point, please. What's the question?
It's probably going to. One can infer that it would go on forever
No,
as well.
no. Bullshit.
Okay.
Does an egg come from a chicken?
Sure.
And does a chicken come from an egg?
Sure.
You can't get the first egg, can you?
No.
But can you break that egg and never get another chicken? See?
Absolutely.
There you go. What's your question?
Mine was similar to the vows.
Okay.
When to
Okay.
know to take
I
higher
understand.
vows.
Very good. What's your question? Is there another question? Somebody here. Go, darling. Yeah. Hang on. What's your question?
I was just curious if you could speak a little bit to the history of the lineages.
Oh, darling, no time for that. No, I can't. I don't know that much anyway. I'm not very good at history.
Right.
It's a specific question.
Oh, you go.
Is the presentation of emptiness and dependent arising
Yeah.
between the
Oh, let's pass a gigabyte and view this one.
between the Kagyupa school and
Oh, I can't. I haven't got a clue. I mean, I've got Nima Lamas and Kagyu Lamas. I love hearing them because it's different, but I can't present their views. I'm so sorry. I don't know him that well. Read His Holiness. He's the best. He'll give you all the views perfect. That lovely book called The Kagyu Tradition of Mahamudra. Beautiful commentary by the Panchanama text about Mahamudra. And His Holiness goes into great depth, snowline coverage about all the different views of Dzogchen and Mahamudra, which is bringing every view of all the traditions. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. Just beautiful. Yeah.
What are the steps you go through to check and see if someone's a proper teacher that can lead you to enlightenment?
I understand. It was like 20 prerequisites, you know. I mean, you should look in the text. I can't remember them all. There's many. The Hinayana level, the Mahayana level, and the Tantrayana level. There's different levels, you know. But I think in general, the bottom line has to be, like anybody, if you're going to study music, you know, if you're going to study violin music, we know there's a marvellous history of musicians of violin playing. There's a lineage going right back to who knows when violins began. Wouldn't you agree? If you want to study Bach's music, there's incredible respect for the lineage of Bach. Would you agree with that? And if you could check up who's valid in that pretty quickly, because you've got a lineage. It's not just somebody overnight deciding they're a violinist and writing a book about it, which is how people think is spiritual. It's very hard to check. But if you check the lineage, you check that person's reputation, you check their students, you check where they came from, their teachers, their sources. That's the way. I mean, I always use this, it was a simpler, the most basic level. So I remember when I even learned to make a cake. It was a dumb example, but I really mean it profoundly. It was my mother who taught me. Now, the first step had to be that I wanted to make a cake, because you can't make a person make a cake if they don't want to learn it. So I was 26 when I wanted to make a cake. I was in London, and I was a hippie, and this thought arose, I want to make a carrot cake, you know? Hippie make carrot cake. I remember the moment it arose, and that's the first step. You've got to want it. Then I thought, okay, I'm going to go home to Melbourne anyway. I'll see my mum, you know. So I decided, I'd ask my mum. But believe me, it wasn't because I wanted to be nice to my mother. I'd done my due diligence. I'd eaten her cakes. I'd eaten her students' cakes. Her peers said she was a valid cake maker. So even a little bit, I'd done my research. And the crucial point is this. I've never had the experience of how to make a cake. So if any person said, oh, I'll show you how to make a cake, I didn't check. And they said, put 14 eggs in. I wouldn't know whether they were right or wrong because I don't have the experience. So the only thing you can rely on is intellectual knowledge. Do you understand? The only thing you can rely on. I remember when I was an old radical feminist, and I first came to London, this country, what am I? New York. I first came here in '74, you know. I remember when I arrived at JFK, I knew I'd found my home, you know. Sort of, it goes at the pace that my mind goes at. I was very happy, you know. So anyway, I was doing Kung Fu already from other places, and I wanted to do Kung Fu, and I was still a radical lesbian separatist feminist at the time, and I wanted to do it with women. So I found a dojo downtown in Chambers Street, opposite Dyke's Lumber, can you believe? It was out the window. So anyway, this really nice dojo, you know, and I was learning, and for 1 year I studied karate. And then I'd left, and I went home to Melbourne, and I realised that I had to stop hating most of the human race. I've been doing this old radical lefty for several years, and blaming all the straight people, blaming all the white people, blaming all the rich people, blaming all the male people, and I was exhausted all options. So I knew I had to stop hating the human race. And I chose to go back to a karate school that was the same style, but it had a male teacher. It was a big move for me. But I checked him, and he said, well, you know, I said, I've done it before, and I was in a blue belt or whatever I was, and he put me in the blue belts. Well, next week he put me back to the white belts. And I was really offended. And I was insulted. But then I thought about it. It was the first time in my life I realised you need a teacher. Because I didn't know. I didn't recognise that I'd chosen the wrong teacher for the wrong reason. So it's not complicated. They don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything about them. But if you can see that they're a part of a valid system, for me the system is a massive point. If you've got a person who's never studied violin with anybody and knows nothing about Bach, I think you're in trouble. If you want to study classical music, even if they're a far-out violinist, you can go back and see their lineage. The same with these Buddhists, you know. Go and check a person, they've got a valid lineage. You check their students. When I first met Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, when I was a radical feminist, I was having a nightmare. All these people talking about males and he's and the ladies sat in the back rows. I was having a mental breakdown. But I remember observing the students, and I appreciated it. I watched Lama Yeshe, I heard his teachings. You use your common sense, you know, and you go one step at a time. It's not easy because because we're all got a mob mentality, as we say in Australia, and we all, if everybody, like the Dalai Lama, it's easy to say you like him. He sounds like a good teacher because everybody likes him. But if suddenly, I always say this, and I mean it seriously, he suddenly disrobed and got a 16-year-old girlfriend, I think 99% of people, including all the Buddhists, would give him up. Because we sort of feel safe liking the Dalai Lama because he looks like a nice guy. I mean, I'm not clairvoyant, I can't see he's a Buddha. I look at all the other lamas and they faint in his presence, and you can tell that they see he's a Buddha, so that gives me confidence. So it's good to have a person you can rely upon, and you can be part of a group. But if suddenly everybody turns against the Dalai Lama, you're going to feel very nervous. Understand? So we've got to have some confidence and go one step at a time, and don't rush in quickly. You know, please be my guru, blah, blah. And then the number of people I've known who've given up their gurus, sue their gurus, think their guru is evil, because they're let in, because it's just like falling in love, it's like attachment. It's disgusting. Honestly, we're so emotional about it in the West, because we've got so much attachment. Be really slow and cautious. Don't be neurotic. Be sincere. And then realize, second, also, the real point about a guru, it's almost like it's got nothing to do with them. It's your mind deciding to see them as a Buddha. That means whatever they do, once you're committed, whatever they do is the action of a Buddha. That's the real practice. That's the real practice. Not whether they behave this way or that way. It's your mind deciding that you're going to see them as a Buddha. And that's where all the realizations come from this. And that's powerful. And that we have to realize, we have to understand emptiness to have that, you know. So slowly, check slowly, check cautiously. Be intelligent, like you would anything you want to learn. You know? Am I answering your question?
Absolutely. Next time you come to New York, will you consider teaching Buddhist logic?
Well, I don't know. We'll see. Who else had a question? Somebody to the vows here. Who had a question? Yes. No, hang on. You better know. Wait, darling. Just a second. You two go to them. Where?
There, if I may, there is something that was asked of us in our Sangha that I would like to get to. So maybe if we have 3 more questions, and then I have a request from someone who's passing tonight. So, if we
What's their name? Please, what's their name?
Her name is.
Who's with them?
Yeah.
Who is with them? Somebody with them right now?
They're Buddhist, and her children, young children who are 8 and 12, and her family and friends are with her. And I just came from the room and did some mantras and
she's a Buddhist.
Yes.
And they're helping her do her practice and things. They're doing the right thing.
She hasn't been conscious. She's
but they're doing. But they understand what she wants. Doing practices for her or not?
Actually, they support her, but I was the only Buddhist. I was there.
But you're going to go back?
Excuse me?
Are you going to go back?
I may. I think she's passed by now.
Pardon?
I think she's passed by now. She was.
Okay.
And I work at a hospital. She was at the
Okay. So we should do medicine Buddha this second. Please. What's her name?
Lisa Malcolm. Lisa Malcolm.
So right now, her mind is still in her body. Let's hope it is. And we can do strong prayers for the medicine Buddha. Just visualize the medicine Buddha. Blissful blue body. Radiant blue light body. Totally blissful. Totally enlightened. Right there. Not just Lisa, but everybody else who's dying in a second. Pouring blissful light into Lisa. Blessing her consciousness and helping. Because already the karmic seed has been activated. It will throw her into the next life. So if she died peacefully, how fantastic. So that she can then, the mind will leave the body, it could be now, it could be half an hour, whatever. We try and pray that the medicine Buddha enables her mind to leave the body so she goes straight to a pure land or straight to a human womb. You know? So we are strongly visualizing light blessing her, and we say a few of the mantras. Ta ta om bekanze maha bekanze ranza samon gate svaha. Ta ta om bekanze maha bekanze ranza samon gate svaha. Ta ta om bekanze maha bekanze ranza samon gate svaha. Ta ta om bekanze maha bekanze ranza samon gate svaha. Ta ta om bekanze maha bekanze ranza samon gate svaha. Ta ta om bekanze maha bekanze ranza samon gate svaha. Full of blissful light. Strongly imagining, dearest Lisa, she find a perfect human rebirth and go straight to the pure land so she can get enlightened quickly. So she can come back and benefit everything. And if you remember as we leave here, say the mantra and have her in your mind as well. So what other questions do we have before we finish?
Thank you.
What questions do we have before we finish? Yes, please.
Thank you for your time and teaching today. Would you have any interest in meditating in Times Square on Saturday?
Say it again, sorry.
Would you have any interest in meditating for a little while in Times Square on Saturday?
What for?
I don't know, there's a lot of distraction there. It's good. Fertile.
Leave them alone. No, leave them alone. Mind your own business. Do your own meditation. Let me have fun. Sweetheart, you mean so well. No, I have no interest. of tea with them. Not meditate, Dharma. You meditate. And when you meditate, you can help them. What a nice thought. Nice reading. What was your question? Now wait a minute, not you. Who was that question? Okay. I'll get to the vows. There was no one else. Okay, good. Now vows. Okay, darling. And you vows as well. There are 3 sets of vows, 3 levels. And the more we understand the lamb ring, the structured organising of this course material, the first level, which is like, you know, there's this lovely analogy. I use it a lot. It's a perfect way of describing this structured path. A bird needs 2 wings, wisdom and compassion. Well, the wisdom wing is like the first and second strokes of the lamb ring, or like junior school and high school. So junior school is back off. There's generally 10 little starting point things, bullet points that Buddha gets before we even take vows. It's general instructions. Don't do actions that harm sentient beings. It's the first instruction. Back off and don't do actions that harm sentient beings. And it's a crucial point. If you're a Christian, the reason you wouldn't do that is because God said, because he's the boss. That's what by definition a sin is. And this is a crucial point. By definition, a sin is doing what God said not to do. They say there's a natural law that killing is wrong, but the real reason it's wrong is because God is the boss. And we all know that. So that means you've got to confess to God and he's got to forgive you. We understand that. And it's the same in your mother's household. She says, don't be naughty, and you've got to get her to forgive you. So that's the dualistic view of morality that we have in our culture, which is why we're all so neurotic and have all this guilt and fear. Because we think we're naughty and someone's going to punish us. Or we're desperate to be praised, you know. The Buddha's view is really fundamental. He says a negative action is a natural law. You can prove it. Do some research in this room. Like I just said to him, do you want to get killed, lied to, stolen from, bad mouth? We all know the answer. The answer is no. Look at the dogs and the ants. They don't like being harmed either. He says that a negative action, first and foremost, is one that harms another. It's a natural law. So he says back off from doing it. But first, not because it harms others. And this is the crucial point about karma. It's because it'll harm you. That's my point to him. The first thing about karma is to actually realise that all my suffering and all my happiness come from my past actions. So it's logical that I don't want suffering, and that's what should determine my wish not to kill, not to lie, not to jump on the wrong partner, because it's driven by delusions. That's why we do these things, and that's what will cause me future suffering. And if you don't want to make it abstract, just remember, you don't like being badmouthed, you don't like being cheated, you don't like people lying to you. We know that. And forget about the lower realm, but that's too abstract for us. This is the one called experiences similar to the cause, where you get harmed by others. We all know we can't stand it. Well, look at the thing that the person does, and all you got to go is, well, that's because I did that to them. Like, it seems cosmic to us, but that should be the motivator first to not want to be a good person. It's for your own sake. Don't think it's, kind of inferior. Then you can then enter, once you've checked on the Buddha, you attempt to live this way, and then when you check on the Buddha, you then enter into Buddhism and you take refuge in the Buddha. You've checked up on him, so you rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and you commit yourself. And then at the same time, or later, you would then take the first set of vows. There's 3 sets of vows, and Buddha loves his vows. They say that a vow is like a subtle form that's visible to clairvoyance. It's something so potent, and there's real logic to vows. We're sitting in this room right now not killing, right? Isn't it, probably? But there's no intention in our mind, I will not kill, is there? Because there's no sentient being to kill, right? So we're being nice people. We think we're nice people. But we're resting on our laurels from past life that no one's attacking us, so we have to defend ourselves and try not to kill the mice that's jumping over our knee. We're here feeling a nice, pleasant life because we've been virtuous in the past. But we're not creating any virtue of non-killing because there's no thought, I will not kill, because there's no sentient being to not kill. So you only create karma when there's a thought. So the main cause of just getting a decent human body is a bucket load of strong, intentional, non-killing seeds planted in the mind from intentional non-killing. And so then as Lama Zopa says, you could be practicing day and night, but not have a vow not to kill, just a vow not to kill. But whereas another person might have a vow not to kill and keeps it purely, the second person is creating infinite more virtuous karma, popping virtuous karmic seeds in their bank vault and purifying their mind infinitely more than the first person, simply because of the potency of vows. And this is Buddha's teaching, that you've got a vow, it's in your mind 24 hours a day. So 24 hours a day, while you're sleeping, while you're having sex with your new girlfriend, if you've got a vow not to kill, you're ticking over virtue of non-killing, and it purifies your mind. As Lama Zopa says, being good is not enough. And that's why he says the karma we must have created, the virtuous karma the morality of restraint, which is the first stages of the wisdom wing, level of morality, the first level of vows. It's the morality of not killing, not lying, not stealing, not this, not that, backing off. There's like no wiggle room. You just don't behave badly, because behaving badly comes from attachment or anger, and that's why it causes us negative karma. So refraining from that in the context of vows is so, it's like an atomic bomb on delusions. And you can just have the 5 lay vows, be a nice person, keep your vows every day, do your 4 opponent vows, your purification at the end of the night, and you can go to bed with a happy mind and have a good life. You can sit there watching your boring old breath for 1 hour every day, but not keep vows. You're just pissing your life down the toilet, wasting your time. Vows are so amazing, you know. They say, got to think about it. So then, but it's kind of logical, because you know yourself when you've got a relationship and you make a decision to commit to each other. You know it's got some real flavour. You've both, in front of witnesses, vowed to each other you won't lie, you won't cheat, you won't whatever you're supposed to do, you know. It's got more power than just vaguely doing it, because you make a strong imprint in the mind, you know. It's the same as a person, let's say, who's a fisherman. It's like they vowed to kill. It's heavier than killing occasionally. So if you vow not to kill, it's stupendous to even think that you want to live the life of a moral person, to truly not harm others. You should be blissed out. Just the first level of vows. It's amazing, you know. Then on the basis of this, you go to the bodhisattva level, which is the compassion wing. And these are stupendous. They're saying all vows are about behaviour. And all they are like bullet points of what you want to do to become the person you want to become. That's all vows are. It's like when you go driving test, you've got to learn the bullet points. You've got to learn to know what you shouldn't do. You learn your vows. I should not go more than this many miles an hour. I shouldn't go into the wrong lane. I shouldn't drive backwards down the road. You learn what you shouldn't do so you don't get killed. Well, vows are the same. They're simply things you decide you'll refrain from based on the understanding of karma, that whatever you think and do and say will bring results to you. So you're protecting yourself. It's for your sake. Then on top of this, you get to the bodhisattva wing, and now you've controlled your body, speech, and mind to some extent. You can start to see we're all in the same boat. And now you want to dedicate yourself to helping them. So now you're qualified to take the bodhisattva vows, and they're also about behaviour, but they're more spacious. And the key thing of the bodhisattva vows, they're ways to help you, not just help people by giving them a cup of tea, but help them create merit. And the motivation for breaking the vow is the point. In the lay vows, there's no wiggle room. You've got to break a vow if you kill. It may be less or worse, but the bodhisattva vows are more spacious. So, for example, if I ring you up and say, hi, darling, and I'm a bit bored, you can, you know, and I just, no, I ask you out for a meal. But you're just kind of bored, you can't be bothered, you don't like me that much. But you say, I'm so busy, ROBINA, I can't go. You broke a bodhisattva vow because you prevented me from creating the merit of offering you a meal. You know, when we're around meals and you don't like that cake, we just say, oh, no, thank you. Because the reason we say no or yes to most things is because of our own attachment. It's completely self-centered. So here you're trying to stretch yourself to think of the other person and find the way that's most skillful for them, which means demand some wisdom, you know. So the bodhisattva vows are amazing. The 18 root vows and then the 42nd secondary. And often you read the vows, they seem a bit abstract and arcane, and they're kind of like abbots and monasteries, and that's where they came from. So we have to sort of really think about them and try to get the essence of what they're trying to show us to do, to go beyond ourselves, to want to be of benefit to others. You know? Then you've got the tantric vows, which come with the vajrayana, which you take when you take a highest tantra initiation. And they're all also about behaviour. But they're all just very technical. When you read them, they're really just more about controlling your behaviour as well. They're all about behaviour. And as Lama Yeshe says, Tantra is highly technical. Because the Tantric yogis are dealing with the subtle physical and mental energies of these geniuses who can control and work with and transform their subtle physical and mental energy. They're super sophisticated level of practice. You know? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Time to go home, isn't it?
I believe so. I wanted to let everybody know that Venerable ROBINA is offering retreat this weekend at Tibet House, which is another beautiful place to practice at. It begins tomorrow at 7 o'clock, I believe, and all day Saturday and Sunday. And
what's this? Is that for me?
Yes, it is.
The topic.
I never drink it. Is it nice?
Venerable ROBINA, what's the topic of your retreat this
Oh, I
weekend?
have no idea. It's the same old, same old.
I think her topic is on.
It's about attachment, but it's going to be the whole deal. I'm trying to squeeze it all, the entire path in every time. It's going to be the same old thing.
My question is appropriate for
Is it inappropriate to take the vows on your own? Like, should you have a qualified teacher to take the Bodhisattva?
Yeah, these vows by definition. These vows by definition are a set of vows coming from the Buddha. So you've got to plug into that power source. You do yourself, but it's not the same as we're talking here. It's not Buddha's vows. You've got to take it from somebody who will become one of your teachers, because that person got it from that person, and you can track it in an unbroken chain right back to the Buddha. Do you understand? So that's what we're talking here. These sets of vows that are very specific in the Buddhist tradition.
Yeah, I mean, I've read them in text multiple times, and I haven't really given them the life force and the commitment because I don't have a teacher, or I don't have that guru relationship yet.
You understand?
Living lineage.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, you just, aspire to meet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
There you
living.
go. That's right. And again, you have many teachers too. You don't have, huh? Hard to go.
Do you think we could do a group picture?
It's up to you. Get a camera and do it.
Let's do it.
I mean, just sit here. Just sit right there. Just get up here somewhere. I'll sit over here. Just grab the chair. Come on.